Welcome to the most prestigious event in Hollywood's calendar. It's the Screen Test Oscars episode.
Razzle dazzle.
Play it again, Sam.
It kind of sounds like you are.
But if you wake me up at 4 a.m, I will backhand you.
Rude.
I was going to say flattery won't get you anywhere, but it might. It might.
Alexa and me are going to have some words.
Joining me, as always, we have, and can we put some classy music behind this, please? We have Chief Film Critic of The Independent, Clarisse Loughrey. We have 1/3 of the Cyber Nerds, it's Joe Ikhinmwin. And joining us this week, His Royal Highness Daniel J. Layton.
Thank you.
How's everyone feeling?
Good.
Good.
The nominations for this year's Oscars were announced this week, including the Academy's picks for Best Picture. The nominations this year include Minari, Prime Video's Sound of Metal, Nomadland, which is my favourite, and that put me in the mood to revisit some of my favourite Best Picture winners on Prime Video, including Birdman, The Hurt Locker, and one of my favourite films of all time, No Country for Old Men. But I think we can go on better and decide what the Best Picture is. So what have you picked for my consideration? Daniel J. Layton, going to come to you first. What have you picked and why?
I have picked, because it is, frankly, the best, most glorious Best Picture of all time, the myth, the legend, the iconic Chicago.
Chicago. Just a classic Peter Kay joke.
They're all classics, Jack. You're right. But this is probably the most classic of all because it references classic Best Picture winner of 2002, Chicago.
Joe, what have you picked?
I have picked the Martin Scorsese crime thriller, The Departed.
Classic. I think that The Departed gets a bit of a bad rap because everyone keeps saying, oh, he won for that because they didn't give it to him for Goodfellas. But I think that The Departed is one of my favourite Scorsese
it's
films.
100%
Scorsese's
my
least
favourite.
best film is
Yeah.
most people's best film ever, you know?
Yeah. But we should also throw that out there because that will do well for us.
Clarisse, what's your pick?
I picked Casablanca, it feels like a really obvious choice. But I think the thing with Casablanca is that it's so famous and so iconic that people kind of forget about it, or they don't actually think about the fact that it is a masterpiece. They just go, oh, it's,
It's almost in its own league.
Yeah, or oh, it's that dumb old movie where they cry in front of the plane. So I'm here to sort of reiterate that Casablanca is genuinely a masterpiece. It's a really good movie, guys.
Let's talk about it.
As well as being that film where they cry in front of a plane.
Yeah. They do cry in front of the plane.
I find it's amazing that all the iconic lines from Casablanca really happen in the final sort of 5 minutes, all in one go.
And also, one of the most iconic lines in it isn't the line. He doesn't say "play it again, Sam."
Yeah, that's a weird one.
Yeah.
I guess it's the same as Star Wars, and I think it basically comes down to the fact that Woody Allen made a movie called Play It Again, Sam, and that's where everyone got confused. But yeah, no, he doesn't say that.
There'll be no misquoting here.
I feel like my take on Casablanca is going to be wild, isn't it? But
interesting.
Yeah, it's just one of those movies that is a classic that everyone hears that, oh, you should watch this, but
just doesn't do anything for you?
Yeah, I hadn't watched it until Clarisse picked it. Because I feel like it is a classic movie, but if you're not a film critic, a hardcore person into film, it's one of the movies you hear about but never watch.
Yeah, you have to be in the right energy and headspace to watch it.
See,
not in a bad way.
I'm
I was
to prove all this wrong. It's a great movie all the time. If you woke me up at 4 a.m. and you're like, hey, we're watching Casablanca, I'd be like, sure.
I mean, I love Chicago, but if you wake me up at 4 a.m., I will backhand you. It is not happening.
So here's how this is going to work. We're going to go through a series of rounds, and I'm going to give you points whenever I choose to, but really the way we're going to do this is that whoever wins the round gets 3 points, whoever loses the round gets 1 point, and whoever's in between gets 2 points. Makes sense? But I also might be chaotic and throw out points whenever I feel like it. And at the end of it all, the winner will get this lovely thing. Ooh. No? Okay, fine.
Do we get extra points for calling it The Departed?
The Departed.
I think so.
I feel like every time someone says that, I should get an extra point. I should get an extra point.
The points are going to be ridiculously high in this one. Okay, so the first round is the IMDB rating round, and this is the round where I don't have any say. This is the people's vote. So what do you think is going to be the highest and the lowest rating out of the choices of your films? Let's go to Joe. Start us off.
All right, Casablanca's gonna win this round for sure because it's old. 10 people reviewed it at the time.
There were bad old movies as well.
There was,
I've
but the
seen
good ones get rated very high, and no one ever goes back and re-rates them because no one watches them these days. But anyway, I digress.
Joe's got some takes, man.
The Departed, I think, is coming into like very slimly above Chicago, so that's mine.
Clarisse?
Yeah, I think Casablanca, because it's just the best. Then The Departed. And then Chicago, which is a movie that I love, but people who don't like musicals aggressively don't like musicals. And so I imagine there are some low scores trying to pull that number down.
Dan, do you agree?
I do agree with that. However, my thing about Chicago is it is the musical that people who don't like musicals get on with.
So do you think that's going to give it a higher IMDB rating?
No. I still think it's going to be the lowest of all three. But I think it's going to be higher than your average musical. But I think it is the Departed at the top. I think Casablanca comes a close second because it's that film that people like to sound impressive. They're like, oh yeah, I've seen Casablanca and I loved it, but they don't remember. Even though it's very good. And then Chicago is a... third. It's in third place.
Okay. All right. Well, let's find out. Alexa, tell me the IMDb rating for The Departed.
The Departed has an IMDb rating of 8.5 out of 10.
8.5. That's pretty good.
It's all right.
8.5 to beat. I'm going to go Chicago first because I think we all agree it's going to be a fight between The Departed.
Yeah, it's not beating 8.5.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, Chicago.
So you think...
Alexa,
Coming at
tell me
9.
the IMDb rating for Chicago.
Chicago has an IMDb rating of 7.2 out of 10.
That's criminal. Alexa and me are going to have some words.
Don't take it out on her.
I'll take my
I'm
2
fuming.
points.
7.2 and an 8.5. So 8.5 to beat. Do we think it's going to do it? 8.5?
I think it...
I
don't
think it
it's gonna-
will. Casablanca's just,
All right.
Who's
Moment of
coming
truth.
in being like, oh, Casablanca 3? Like, I feel like you're either just going to rate it or not rate it at all, right? But
Alexa.
the people who don't care about it are just going to steer clear.
Yeah, they never
Tell
went
me
back
the
to watch it.
IMDb rating for Casablanca.
Casablanca has an IMDb rating of 8.5 out of 10.
Neck and neck.
Listen, I feel like I win because my
So
movie
now
was
you
rated
have
R.
to fight?
No, well, no, Dan. No, there's no physical violence here.
Okay.
But I think what we're going to do is give Casablanca and The Departed 3 points. And Dan, even though you're last, you're technically in second place. So I'm going to give you 2 points.
I think that's wise.
Yeah.
I think that's wise. That's a really...
I think it would be very unfair to give 3 and then you won.
Do you know, Jack, that's really smart. I think you're absolutely wonderful, and I'm thrilled that you're hosting today.
I was going to say flattery won't get you
Shame.
anywhere, but it might. It might. The second round is cast. And what's interesting about this is obviously at the Oscars, which is what we're talking about, out of all these films, Catherine Zeta-Jones is the only one to have won her category for acting. So does that automatically mean it has the best cast?
Well, not only was she the only one to win her category, she was also up against someone else from her film in that same category. It was her and Queen Latifah both nominated.
Mm-hmm.
So usually when two actors from the same film are nominated in the same category, it divides the votes. And it didn't in this instance.
Because she's Catherine Zeta-Jones.
She's amazing in the movie, as is Queen Latifah, as is Renee Zellweger, also nominated.
You're on a roll, Dan. Keep
I
going.
know. Well, okay. This was... I will. Thank you very much. This was the year that the John C. Reilly Award came into being, which we all know is the honorary award if you're in 3 Best Pictures. And it was 2002. He was in The Hours, Gangs of New York, and Chicago. Oh my... It's worth thinking about.
If John C. Reilly is in your film, you're more likely to get
Listen, that
nominated
at
for an
least
Oscar.
boosts it. Absolutely. 3 in 1 year. Come on.
I mean, actually, this is something that I want to talk about. Do we usually think that the Oscars get things right? Is that something that
No.
the Oscars usually do? Very straight in. No.
No,
No, they never do.
they
because
gave Casablanca Best Picture.
Right. We've got to get this
Sorry.
beef out of the way.
Listen. I'm going
What
to apologize.
happened to you while you were watching it?
Nothing. It's just
That's the problem.
Exactly. Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
boring.
Right. Well, by the end of this, let's reassess.
Okay.
Because I'm going to put forth some convincing arguments.
I'm listening.
Hopefully.
Go on, well, talk to me about Casablanca now then. Talk about the Humphrey Bogart and what's her face in Casablanca?
What's a face?
Yeah.
Rude.
Whoa.
What's her name?
Ingrid Bergman.
That's it.
Like one of the greatest actresses who ever lived, but whatever. What's her face? Wow. What's so interesting about Casablanca though is one of those movies that made those stars. You know, Humphrey Bogart up until this point, he'd been in The Maltese Falcon, so he was pretty famous already, but he was mostly like, you know, the edgy film noir guy, like seedy, like coming out of the shadows to stab you, man, Humphrey Bogart. But Casablanca established him as a romantic lead, and that's what really kicked his career off, and he became the highest paid actor at the time. And then that's how you get Bogart and Bacall, which if there's anything hotter on screen than Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman, it is Humphrey Bogart and Laura Bacall. And then you have that contrast with Ingrid Bergman, who this is also the movie that just completely kicked off her career and made her the one of the greatest actresses that ever lived.
And they do, when you think about that kind of classic old Hollywood movie, they do effervesce on screen. They are beautiful. And
The lighting on her is ridiculous as well.
Obscene. They're absolutely stunning.
glows.
You're just drawn into their eyes. Neither of them, however, are named in the rap section of Madonna's Vogue, and I think that goes against Casablanca. So,
Joe, I mean, the cast in The Departed is immense. There's so many stars in it, and they're all. I mean, do you have a favourite?
I mean, for me, Leonardo DiCaprio stands out, but obviously Matt Damon and Jack Nicholson are both amazing. They both got nominated for Best Supporting Actor, and both didn't win due to the fact that Dan said before that it divided, and neither of them was Catherine Zeta-Jones. But I
she
feel
would have
like
been great in it, though, and that's why Chicago is so brilliant.
I just feel like that's why this movie's so strong, because it's just got a cast that everyone wants. It's got actors that everyone wants in their movies. It puts Leonardo DiCaprio and Matt Damon together when they're like at the height of their power, which is great, especially when they're directed by Martin Scorsese. So
I mean, let's talk about everyone's accents as well, because they're varying.
Can we talk about Ray Winston?
Yeah, let's talk about Ray Winston to start with. Thank you very much.
I have another
In Boston
objection, but I'll
accents.
put that forward later on.
Ray Winston's Boston accent is something. Even Martin Sheen struggles sometimes, but I think my favourite aspect of the cast, obviously the stars are the stars, but I really like Alec Baldwin and Mark.
Oh, yeah.
Marky Mark.
Oh, I
No.
don't like Marky Mark at all.
I think he's
not
so
good at this.
It's
funny.
a one-note character the whole way through.
That's
And
fine with
fine.
me.
And that's
No,
fine.
but it's
so
not when the other
funny.
characters
For
are
him.
so strong. Like, also Martin Sheen. Don't ever come for Martin Sheen again. That is
Martin
your
Sheen
president.
struggles with that accent a little bit.
He struggles with nothing.
He's the president of the United
Thank you
States.
very much.
The thing with Mark Wahlberg in this movie is that I cannot believe that he's existing within the same universe. Like, he's walked off the set of Ted. Like, he brings such a different energy to the movie, you know, and you're having him with Leo and Matt Damon, who are taking everything so seriously, and he's like, "Who are you? I'm the guy who's doing his freaking job."
I
and
thought
it's like,
Mark
calm
was the
down.
only one nominated, but I maybe read it wrong.
Was he nominated for Best Supporting Actor in this
Yeah.
film? He was, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I think he's really funny. But my favourite bit in the whole thing is when Alec Baldwin asks him if somebody wants a cigarette, and he goes, do you want a cigarette? I bet you don't smoke, do you?
Yeah,
One of
you
them health
fitness
nuts?
freak.
Go fuck yourself.
that
Like, just doesn't let him have a conversation.
But I think the other thing
good.
about Marky Mark is that he's on his own other thing doing his whole other show, while Leo is giving the most strained performance ever.
I believe all that stress.
Exactly, and Matt Damon is playing it with this blank face, and Pacino's off doing
Jack Nicholson.
that's the one, Jackie. He's off doing his own thing in Crazy Town, and then it's like, okay, Mark, I'll see you in the next scene.
He's like, you know, those air things with the arms. He just comes into
A
every
wobbly,
scene,
waving,
like,
inflatable arm, flaving
he's
tube
the
man.
inflatable
Wahlberg.
tube man coming into every scene, like, hi.
Joe, do you have a favourite performance in it, if you can pick?
No, Leonardo DiCaprio's performance is my favorite. Like, everything he does in it is believable, and I just feel his pain in it, where he's come from a bad family and he wants to be different. He wants to get into the police force and make a change, and because of that history with his bad family, they just say no. and it pushes him down a different path, and then he just ends up being like this broken guy who's trying to do right, but it's caught in a tough situation, and it just doesn't work for him in the end. Like, I just think Leo is.
Are we in spoiler town?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because the moment when he is shot square in the head is a visceral reaction because of everything you just said. It's like his
you're
performance
constantly
is
hoping
so strong.
that he's going to get away with it.
Exactly.
Yes,
and then
that's why I love
suddenly
it.
it's like, oh, you were so close. You were so close. And I feel devastated for him.
Joe, is it your favourite Leo performance?
Yes, I'm gonna say that the only other Leo performance I feel like I feel was up with it was what's gonna be crazy is the Man in the Iron Mask, which I also love. Yeah.
Oh,
I
wow,
know,
what
it's
a pick.
crazy. It's crazy. But I
Yeah,
love that.
well, my favourite Leo performance is Catch Me If You Can, which came out
That is
Chicago
tough.
year
That's
and
tough.
wasn't even nominated at the Oscars.
Because
Chicago
crazy.
is so good. Where was its musical number?
We
Where
already
was Leo's
established that the
Fosse
Oscars
neck?
don't get things right. We said that at the top of the show, right?
Except when they do
Obviously,
for 6 wins for Chicago.
Yeah, well, yeah. Dan, is there anything else you want to say about the cast in Chicago? I feel like we haven't had much time on that yet.
Just that it's not only these are all actors who are being asked to do a hell of a lot. Of course, in all of these movies, they're being asked to do a lot. Carrying the emotional heft of The Departed is incredible. You know, as I said, the effervescence of Casablanca. But these are actors being asked to sing, dance, and act in taking something that's like hyper camp, and I'll talk about this later, but it's a hyper camp musical restrained for on screen. And Catherine Zeta-Jones actually had a haircut. Originally, they wanted to have long hair, but she wanted a bob to show that she was the one doing all the dancing. So they went into intense rehearsal process, and they carried all of it off. And none of them having to pick up slack for anybody else. They're all hitting it off, the mark. And we've seen so many musicals where actors come in, naming no names, Russell Crowe, and maybe don't give their best vocal performance.
Pierce
but
Brosnan.
there isn't a single... Indeed, with the whole shirt rip, although I will defend Mamma Mia till death. But in this film, every single one of them is firing on all cylinders. And I just think it is an incredible classic. They belong in that same conversation, I think, as Bogarts and Bergman's, in terms of the classic performance.
It's nice to see something rewarded for an aspect of performance that usually isn't sort of reward, like the idea of like being on screen and crying or doing a big dramatic scene is very easy to be able to go, oh, that's good acting. But to see the dedication from somebody like Catherine Zeta-Jones, who's going to learn everything like that and perform completely by herself. Dancing. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, be able to learn an entire new skill like that. That's why I think like Ryan Gosling in La La Land learned to play piano. Like, that's something to do with his performance that you might not know. You'd be like, oh, he must be able to play piano, or it's a double. No, he learned how to do it. And I think that's the same thing here, is learning an entire new skill for this performance.
And you know that these actors are good. You know John C. Reilly's good. And you know that Queen Latifah as a rapper is great. And then they show up on the screen and they show you something else. And you're like, okay, thank you. Keep that on celluloid forever.
Well, this is so difficult. It's almost like we're talking about Academy Award winning movies to try and discuss which I think is the best performances in the film. So I'm going to have to just go, as always, with my personal preference. The Departed gets 3 points, Casablanca second with 2 points, and Chicago with 1 point. But the points are arbitrary because all of them are excellent, and it almost seems silly to be like, oh, Casablanca comes second. So that means that currently The Departed is in the lead with 6 points. Just behind is Casablanca with 5, and at the bottom is Chicago with 3. A little way to go, but not impossible, Dan.
I know.
You could bring it back.
It's a great film, Jack.
Have you got a musical number planned to make a point?
Well, I have a reveal under this. I'm going to rip it, and I've got a lovely sort of sequin number. Just you wait.
That brings us on nicely to round 3, which is memorable scenes. And this is a bit where I want you to talk specifically about a moment in the film that you think stands out and makes it better than all the rest. Joe, we're going to come to you first with The Departed.
Yeah, this was really hard for me to pick out of the opening scene in Departed and a scene that we've spoke about like 3 or 4 times already, which is the elevator scene, which starts with Matt Damon getting to the building where he's meeting Leonardo DiCaprio for the first time, and they really have it out. I just love everything about this scene, the way the camera stays there just longer than it needs to be, and then they get together, and it's like everything in the movie has built up to this moment, to this confrontation, and Leonardo DiCaprio was still trying to do the right thing thinking that he can get out of this scenario when he can't, and then that then transpires in a very visceral way that Dan said earlier when they go down an elevator and he gets shot in the head by another informant who then gets shot in the head by Matt Damon, and the plot is just unraveling more and more, and we're seeing that even though we've been entrenched in this movie of layers, there's so many more layers.
We're following this one specific story, but with there's other stories we don't even know about.
All there, and I feel like that scene there encapsulates all of it, and I just love it.
Yeah, I think that I mean, my favorite bit in that is when Leo smacks him in the nose with that gun and tells him to shut the fuck up. Yeah. And it's just like everything I've wanted to see happen to that character happens in that moment. And I was like, oh, just give him a nosebleed, make him shut his mouth.
And it kills you because he actually gets out of that scene, like, and for a little bit you're like, man, he's gonna pull this off. Like, this is making my stomach turn. It's crazy. Yeah,
I another thing, I just want to talk about what's in my mind, because I don't know where else we're going to sort of talk about this sort of stuff. But there's so many things littered through The Departed that come up in quite a lot of Scorsese's films, like, you know, the exploration of masculinity and things like that.
Irishman.
Sure, yes.
Shooting things.
But with Matt Damon's character, maybe this is sort of just common knowledge, but I always got the impression that he's got some repressed homosexuality going on in his character. Like he literally gets introduced by calling the other rugby team a very horrible slur for gay people, and then throughout the entire film there's these
performance issues with
performance issues and things like that.
I read that before I went to rewatch, because I thought like, I'll just refresh my memory rather than watching the movie again. And then I read that and I was like, I don't remember that. I'm going to watch the whole... So I watched the whole thing, and with that in mind, there's definitely something going on there. And the idea as well to tie it, not to go too far down a rabbit hole, but to tie it into, you know, the Catholicism, there's something to be said for Jack Nicholson's character being also, you know, bisexual. The real man that he's based on, I believe, actually was bisexual. So there's something else in there as well. And it whether or not it's within the script or in their performances, it definitely adds an extra layer to it.
Yeah, I think it's definitely there and open for interpretation on how you want to perceive the character yourself.
There's definitely a lot of self-loathing, whatever it is.
But
I love a gay subtext. It's in there, Othello, as well. It's great.
I think it's great. I feel like elevator scene's the thing.
Clarisse, are you going to go for the big scene?
Am I gonna screw myself over by saying no?
But see, this is in defense of Casablanca. When you say the big scene,
sure,
I think which.
Right,
that's true.
I mean, I think about the plane and
see, I think about
maybe not today, maybe not
piano.
Tomorrow, and I think about
all the gin bars
this is the start of a beautiful friendship.
So I'm gonna not go. I'm gonna go with my favorite scene, and this is one of my favorite scenes in all movies, period. Which is when they're in Rick's cafe and the German officers start singing a traditional German song, and then Rick's sort of like girlfriend that he tossed away, who's a French refugee, both on screen and real life, starts singing the Marseillaise, and she with tears in her eyes, and then slowly the whole room joins in and they overpower the Germans by singing La Marseillaise. Because I'm French American, like I have family history that connects to the resistance and to obviously World War II. So that scene has always been so powerful to me. I cry every single time I watch it, and I think it's because the truth of that scene is that so many people in that room were real life refugees, and you can feel like that little strand of hope that they're still clinging on to in that scene. Because as I said, this is the middle of World War II, and no one really knew how things were gonna turn out, and there was an incredible amount of fear.
Think about the idea that like they didn't know what the ending of it was yet. That's
you always have to try and think about, especially films like this, in context as well, because there's so much cinema history that hasn't even happened. So like it's hard to like, especially when we talked about this with 2001: A Space Odyssey. Like you see stuff that you think of as like par for the course, but there it is, fresh and new for the first time. That same thing exists in Casablanca. Then you have the added, you know, real world stakes of how's this war going to end? Keeping that in your mind while you're watching it adds so much.
And that's the thing. It's like, I find it difficult to feel like it's antiquated because it was something that was happening to those people in the room at the time. And you see it on their faces. And that's why that scene just remains so, so powerful to me, because it was a film about refugees, made by refugees, made in Hollywood, them trying to call out to America, who at this point, it was after Pearl Harbor, America had just joined the war, but this film is still sort of like trying to shake people out of their isolationism and be like, look, this is what is happening to us. We are refugees. Like, we are bringing like all of the, and you have to imagine like every single person in that room probably went through something horrific, because I mean that's the reality of their stories, and they are bringing all of those emotions, all those personal histories into that room and into that scene. And like I know like the airplane scene is really iconic because all of the dialogue, but that scene to me is like nothing beats it in terms of how powerful it is.
Clarisse has picked a musical scene, Dan.
Hey, and the singing's pretty good, even though they're all crying. And I should add that like lots of people have documented that people were crying, like the tears were real in that scene.
I'm sure. But Dan, in contrast, are you going to pick a dialogue scene from Chicago?
I do feel very attacked. When you have a memorable scene from Chicago, take your pick. Like, of all of the musical numbers, is it going to be the absolute fire of that opening, which as a kid, when I went to see this musical in the cinema and all of this frenetic action's happening, that incredible Evan Candace score is going on around you, and you're like, oh, what's happening? What's this? And then Catherine Zeta-Jones rises out of the ground to sing all that jazz. Am I going to pick Mr. Cellophane? Am I going to pick Razzle Dazzle? You can't really go wrong, but I have chosen the most memorable scene of all, is that testament to the power of yoga that is the Cell Block Tango. Splits everywhere, spread eagles. The scene that launched 1,000 tango scenes in every musical film subsequently. Joel Schumacher's Phantom of the Opera, I'm looking at you. I just think it is this... I remember seeing it for the first time and just being transfixed at the quality of the dance, the singing, the tightness of that choreography, the tightness of the outfits, the character work from each of the 6 women. And I was I 12? Yeah, I was 12 when it first came out. And I saw, this was like my introduction to semiotics and film language. Like the moment where, it sounds really funny to like think back on it, but like the one innocent murderess has the blue light, and I remember going like, oh, that's so interesting. Like, and it's just
there's quite a lot of it's obvious stuff, but I never mind that sort of stuff in movies. Like even in the All That Jazz thing, there's like cross-cutting between her singing the number and Renee Zellweger getting it on with somebody, and roll my stockings down, and they cut to her having her stockings rolled down.
This is something I'm going to talk about later on when we're on into the craft, but like the editing is a reflection, I think, of the classic Fosse choreography. So that's all about finger snaps and quick, slow, and like, a glimpse of thigh or a movement, and that is in existence in the edit as well. And that is so evident in Cell Block Tango, where things start off slow, and it even begins with that diegetic kind of the drip, a man walking, nails on a and that's the beat of the song, and it builds to this frenetic red climax where all of these women are singing in unison, and it's just you can't, if you don't feel anything watching that, you don't feel things.
Sorry, go ahead.
No. Tell me how you're unfeeling.
I'm not gonna lie, because musicals are not my thing at all. Like, I try to avoid them at all costs. But watching Chicago, I'll give it its props. Like, it did keep me engaged, and I didn't feel like the music was like out of place or anything. So it did connect to me.
It swells inside you a little bit. That Cell Block Tango in particular, towards the end, you're like, yeah, they did have it coming, actually.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good, so I'm not gonna lie.
What is it about musicals, Joe, that doesn't connect with you? Is it just that you just find it a bit silly or something? Like my mom won't watch musicals. She's like, why are they singing? Like,
it just pulls me out. It just pulls me out.
Yeah.
Like, we're in this super dramatic scene, and then someone starts tapping their foot, and then trumpets break out. Like it's just a bit. I just feel like it's a bit out of place in movies for me, but I did enjoy Chicago, and I thought like it was done very well.
That's
I-
a common
And I was surprised.
problem that
is
people.
the rat in The Departed a natural thing that would happen?
Well, here's what's
The
funny.
well-timed
said-
rats are part of real
I feel
life.
like the Departed is not one that I can really come for in this respect. But so I find it difficult when people are like, I just don't understand why they're singing. But I'm perfectly happy to go and
Yep.
see the most successful movie of all time,
Yep.
where a man drank a radioactive drink and now is a big green rage monster,
Yeah.
and a Norse god comes down from a
I
rainbow
just
slide.
feel like in the movies you're going in with knowing everything in here is going to be ludicrous, as opposed to going into this and I don't know.
But is
escapism and
bursting
stuff.
into song not ludicrous? I think the point of musicals is that essentially if a character can't speak it, they sing it, and if they can't sing it, they dance it. That's the progression of a musical, and also like musicals are Hollywood. Hollywood was built off the back of musicals, and I wish that people were able to sort of separate the idea of why are they singing, which I personally think is quite a weak argument, but you know,
I agree with you, Dan. I think that it's basically like, if you can go to an action film and watch them break out into a fight scene, you can watch a musical where they break out into song. Like no one has beautifully choreographed fight scenes like they do in movies. It's just part of the whole language of this stuff. Right, okay, let's wrap it up. I'm gonna give it to Casablanca. I think well argued, Clarisse. I think the fact that the context of it and the fact that it's based in a time when the war wasn't over, and like you said, like a lot of the people in the scene were really feeling those emotions and how it captured them.
And also, if I will kind of borrow your point about if you watch that scene and you don't feel emotions, I don't, you know.
Yeah. I'm going to give it to Casablanca 3 points. The Departed gets 2 points. I think that scene really sticks with you. And Chicago, I think I'm just not as much of a, I don't dislike Chicago, but I'm just not as much of a fan as you, Dan. And that scene, when you're describing it, I'm like, oh yes, I remember now, but it's not something that just immediately comes to my mind. But I was thinking of all that jazz in my head, like. But
because there are so many memorable
scenes.
I always think of them shooting their names out in the lights, which I know is from the stage show.
Yeah.
But
have you seen the stage show, Dan?
Several times.
How is it as an adaptation? Or is that something you want to talk
so
about
I
later?
saw. I probably will, but like the short version is I saw the film first, then the stage show, and I was a little bit like, oh, okay. It's not for me as good as the film, which is a very rare experience for.
But it's
a
always
musical
like
film.
whatever you see first usually is your favorite of the two adaptations.
Yeah.
Okay, so that means at the moment The Departed and Casablanca are still neck and neck, like on IMDb, 8 points each, and Chicago with 4 points.
Can I just check? I
Go on.
might have missed the memo, but are we playing golf rules so the lowest score wins?
We aren't,
Right.
but you can tell yourself that if it makes you feel better.
I will. Thank you.
Round 4 is craft, and this is where we're going to be speaking specifically about the filmmaking, so you can focus on the writing or the directing or the production design or the costume design or the editing, the music, anything that you think makes it stand out, and we're going to go to Joe first.
All right, for craft, I picked editing. I think this movie is edited by Thelma Schoonmaker, and she won her 3rd Oscar for it. I love everything about the editing in this movie. Sometimes, I mean, they say that editing's supposed to be invisible, but I love how visible it is in this movie at points. I feel like it transitions you from scene to scene in a great way. There's so many times where, for there's one scene where Jack Nicholson's come in and they've got this song and it's so loud and it's so over the top, and then the second he starts speaking, it cuts off and it's just silent.
There's a lot of that in the film as well. Like even when they introduce, the first 15 minutes, and then they do the title after that, which is already like strange and immediately puts you off. And then they've got that, and then it just stops as soon as DiCaprio knocks on the door. They do a lot of that quite jarring editing.
Yeah, and I love it, and I feel like it gives such a good vibe to the movie. I also love the beginning where it's got the clips from the 70s chopped up and the school buses, and it's just setting you up with it's giving you so much.
It's going full Scorsese.
It's giving you so much knowledge about what you're about to partake in and the journey you're about to go on without actually saying anything. I just love it, and I feel like she's a beautiful film editor in
Yeah.
general.
I love the moment as well when it starts on the circle and then expands out.
I call that the Prisoner of Azkaban circle, because I feel like, and they used it twice in this film, and I was that was the only bit where I was like, okay, that
it's
felt
the way
like
I would argue not invented by Prisoner of Azkaban.
I don't
that
understand.
technique.
I'm not familiar.
Probably has a little bit more film history.
There's a couple of
I need to
things.
see you working on that one. But no, to back up what Joe's saying, I feel like there's one scene that sticks out, which is like right now can't remember where it's placed, but it's when Leo is packing like mad. I think it may be just after Martin Sheen's died.
Lots and lots of jump cuts.
Yeah, he's trying to get
so
out.
many jump cuts, and but even some of them are like infinitesimal. It's like they've cut out at most 2 frames, and it's really jarring, but also really gives you that sense of like freneticism. You're very much in his head through that editing, and it kind of speaks to exactly what you're saying.
And to go with what you said about Chicago, Dan, with like the introduction of semiotics, and like I said, I am not opposed to quite obvious imagery, and there's a bit of that Scorsese uses in the opening scene for the Departed, is introducing
Extra
Jack
point.
Nicholson literally in the shadows. Like, so for a long
You
time,
don't see his face.
he's just in shadow. He's a complete silhouette. Even in the shop, you never see his face until he comes out and says, "When you're facing a loaded gun, what's the difference?" That is the first time you see him. And then right after that moment, Thelma's wonderful match cut from the little child to adult Matt Damon. That bit, I mean, what a beautiful way to tell that story. That like, here he is grown up now, and you understand exactly what it is. I think a lot of the editing is telling you the story. And you say it's not invisible. It isn't. It's very like quite obvious sometimes in this, but on purpose. But then there are moments like that don't jump out, but are absolutely doing a lot of the heavy lifting for you.
I think what's great about Thelma Shoemaker is that, like, every decision is so intentional and so tied to the story. Like, things that seem like an aesthetic choice, it's like it's never an aesthetic choice. It's because it's trying to like push forward a certain idea, and it's just so funny then when you watch sort of people trying to be Scorsese and not quite, and they're
Todd
borrowing
Phillips.
all the same technique. They're doing the jump cuts and they're doing all the zooms and everything, but they're just like randomly just dropping it in.
What's
like,
that? It's an amazing line. I think it was Roger Ebert in his criticism of, I think, Battlefield Earth. I can't fully remember which one it is, but he says that it's like, this filmmaker has learned that some cinematographers use Dutch angles, but he hasn't learned why.
Yes.
And I think there's an element of that to people who try and emulate, because Marty also talks about how important Thelma is to his craft and his success as a director. So it's not just that it's like he's got a great brain and found a good editor. It's very much that she has, she's made it.
Yeah, and they clearly understand each other. It's like one of those great creative partnerships where I imagine they don't even need to tell each other stuff. They just like look at themselves.
And I
in the
bet
eye
she
and they
does
just
stuff
go,
that like
yes.
he wouldn't have even thought of. And I've even seen him say, like, sometimes you don't think something's going to work, but then you see it in the context of the edit, and all of a sudden, no, it does something else that I wasn't expecting. And I think The Departed is an excellent example of how good she is at that.
Yeah, I feel like just learning more about that relationship was actually one of the greatest things that Departed's given me, to be honest. So that she's an amazing person and an amazing editor, and I love it.
Very genuinely, I think probably the best.
Daniel J.,
Hello.
what craft are you picking from Chicago?
So I want to talk about the strength of the adaptation, because when you take a musical from stage to screen, it is a tough task, and that's why there are so few.
Yeah, it's kind of rare that it works as well.
Yeah, because they are similar disciplines, but they are wildly different in so many different ways. Because when you let's take Chicago as an example. The stage show is, as I said before, hyper camp. It is so silly, and there are many jokes to the audience. And there's one bit where at the end of all that jazz, Roxy has shot Fred, and the shots are like and there's a hit of the drum, and he's like, oh, and then she's down and she goes, I gotta pee, and she runs off stage, and the audience is like, ha ha ha, and I'm like, because what I'm used to is what Rob Marshall has done in the adaptation, which is to take it and ground it in reality, and the performances are so genuine. So she's having this real moment of like my whole world is crumbling around me because you've been lying to me this whole time. You're a liar, Fred. Dreams are fading in front of her, and she's heat of passion she goes to grab this gun and shoots him, and then there's a moment she looks in the mirror and it's like, oh crap, what have I done? And that kind of understanding of how to use the medium is so rare, I think, for a movie musical director. See also Cats, where he has fundamentally misunderstood what
I was
Cats
going
is.
to bring up like even Les Miserables, which is I think mishandled as well. And I think the best thing, not to make this a conversation about that, but the best example from that of a good musical adaptation is Anne Hathaway's performance, which is of one of the biggest, grandest pieces of musical theatre of all time, and she makes it this tiny, tiny little performance because the camera can see everything, whereas on stage you have to be big in order to understand it. And so he's really good at taking that.
You're reaching
and
for
making
the back
small.
row, and the other thing about Les Miserables, which it ties into the adaptation thing, is they take I Dreamed a Dream from a moment where essentially in the stage show Fontaine has just been sacked, and then everything gets worse, and they move it to after everything has got worse. So she's at her lowest moment, which I think is a really interesting choice. I've actually spoken to someone I know who has played Fontaine and gone like, what do you think? Where should it
We
live?
brought up Carrie on this show before. She came up when we were talking about Heathers in another episode.
She's just in everything. So yeah, I spoke to Carrie and I was like, because I think I Dreamed a Dream is such a devastating song about how everything is over. Life has killed the dream I dream. And she feels that it's better off in the place it is in the show, which is when she still has a little bit of hope. And that, I think, speaks to the difference between stage and screen. And Rob Marshall with Chicago has found a way to take that kind of heightened, hyper-real weirdness of performing and go, okay, well, we can use a narrative device of Roxy dreams. Roxy wants to be a star. And in order, and tying into what I said earlier on about how when you, in a musical, if you can't speak it, you sing it. The song is a way to give the audience exposition, and the song is a way to make the audience feel and understand things. And we get that by proxy through Roxy. I didn't mean to rhyme just there, but I did, and I'm quite proud of myself.
Extra point for rhyming.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm holding you to that.
No, that is genuinely how it works.
Oh, brilliant. Good. So yeah, I just think that the Rob Marshall gets what makes a musical work and gets what makes a movie work, and has found a way to put them together. And I think the fact that since Chicago won Best Picture, and it had been, well, actually, this is getting into cultural impact, which I've got so much to say.
I will say, like, I feel like Rob Marshall, out of the modern, like, musical directors, is one of the only ones that actually understands how to stage a number and how to actually put the camera in a way that captures the choreography and, like, the pace of the scene. Like, the new Aladdin. And sorry to dunk on that movie, but I remember watching it, and it's the scene where they're doing the Prince Ali parade and the camera's off center for no reason. And I remember sitting there so infuriated, and no one else around me cared. But it's like, there is a language to the musical, and like you have to understand like the grammar of how to film it.
Exactly, understanding both the grammar of film and the grammar of musicals is such a difficult thing. And so I heard James Corden on the set of Cats be like, there is no one who could possibly bring this to the screen other than Tom Hooper. And God love him, but a chill went down my spine. I was like, no, we're not having that be the discourse. Like, that's not...
Okay, Clarisse, what do you pick from Casablanca that stands out for you above all the rest in terms of the way it's made?
Well, I guess because I'm going to try and use other things for the cultural influence one, but I'm going to go for the script because it is iconic. And as you said, that final airplane scene, every single piece of dialogue that they share is now famous and has now been taken out of context and used 100 times over. It's a bit of a weird situation because we're not really sure exactly who wrote the screenplay, because it passed through a lot of different hands. I think most people attribute the really iconic stuff to the Epstein brothers. I mean, they were the ones who came up with that whole finale of him deciding to that Elsa should leave and he'll stay, and it's so noble and it's so dramatic. And I think the thing with Casablanca is that because I keep going back to this idea, because we can't dismiss this movie.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to like center all my arguments around the idea that like this movie does not deserve to be dismissed as like some old fuddy-duddy thing, because I think again it's remembered as the romantic thing, and they're in front of the airplane and they're crying their tears, very sad farewell. But it's like, okay, but in the context of what is happening in that scene, it's not just two lovers saying goodbye. It's Rick knowing that he has to act for the greater good. And so he's saying like, look, we are still in love with each other, but we can't be together because there's bigger things going on. And it's like, with three people don't amount to a hill of beans in this crazy world, or whatever he says.
And also the way I watched it, which was at 2 a.m. with a box of wine, was that
that's the way to watch it. I think that's the way it was intended.
I think very much so.
It was very much intended.
But the line that got me at the end, having enjoyed myself the whole way through, was that, you'll regret it, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. And I was like,
but sooner, for the rest of your life.
And I
for
was
the rest of your life.
I was fucked. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
But that's the thing. It's like the weight of the tragedy in that scene. It's them knowing that, look, they're probably gonna be a bit miserable for the rest of their lives because they really should have been together because of how insanely in love they were. But like, they have to do this because it's about putting aside their personal desires and their selfish desires and acting for the greater good, and also breaking out of that sense of isolationism, which is what connects it back to this idea that like a lot of people call Casablanca just, it's like a very good piece of war propaganda because it was essentially telling Americans at the time who were just entering into World War II, like, hey, you got to be like Rick. Like, you can't just say, I don't stick my neck out for nothing. And you can't just look out for yourself anymore. You have to look out for the world. And look, here's this amazing movie about all these refugees who are sacrificing everything. And it's time to act. And so you see this through this, like, fabulously written, like, really charismatic and cool anti-hero type in Rick Blade, who I just think is one of the coolest characters ever put on film, because he spends the whole movie just like, I can't do that, I just look out for myself. And then slowly, like, he doesn't say it, he doesn't have this big speech where he's like, I've decided to be a good man and now I'm gonna do good things forever. It's that slow breakdown where, for example, he lets the band play the Marseillaise in that scene. That's a big turning point. He lets this refugee couple win the roulette so that they can buy visas, and it's like the very slow, and you see it in Bogart's face where it's sort of like melting, and he's got such a like,
it's a very measured script, isn't it? Like, it's very
And it's nice to see that all of these moments are iconic, not because the lines are just good, but because it's based in real like character journey and arcs and
even though in the era the acting is very wooden in certain places, not always, but in some places it still has that heft. It's like viewing it in context, to kind of push back on what I was saying earlier on, it still has the power to make me cry with my box of wine.
The thing about it is, I feel like all of that stuff is 100% true, but because it's such a classic and it's so old, so many other best pictures have done what it's done in their own way and better and translated it more for the time they're in now.
Though?
Because they've learned from it.
But that assumes that like every like movies have just been getting better, which I disagree with.
Not all movies have been getting better, but we're talking about best pictures. I mean, to say that there's no other best picture winner that has a better script than Casablanca.
But do you think that films coming since have built on Casablanca, and so its
definitely, and that's where I would give it its props
considered
as a classic. I feel like films have learned from it and built from it, but it's like where we're at now, it's tough to say, oh, Casablanca is the best picture of all time. Like,
I feel like you have to grade it on a curve.
But
I
I
don't
think
believe
like
in that.
that's assuming that the movie is only emotionally powerful for then. Like all the topics in Casablanca, the idea of like, you know, looking beyond yourself, being anti-isolationism of refugees and the refugee plight, like that stuff is still very relevant
that stuff,
today.
That
and
stuff
like
is very prevalent. I don't want to like diminish the
no.
topic that it covers, but I'm just saying it's like.
Are you talking about the execution specifically?
Yeah, in terms of as a film.
Yeah, I'm talking like.
And it's a taste thing as well, isn't it? Like, I mean, if that's not your
bag.
Yeah, if it's not the sort of thing
Baby.
that grabs you, it's not the sort of thing that grabs you.
Yeah, I mean,
and you can enjoy something that explores the same thing in an
a different
entirely
way.
different context.
Definitely. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. I guess like I don't want anyone to feel like I'm a Casablanca hater, but that's just that was just the
kind of
feelings
sounds
I had.
like you are.
That's what your reveal is. You rip off that outfit and it's just a big Casablanca with a line through it.
They're the feelings I had when watching it.
So to summarise, Joe, for The Departed, you said that the editing. Dan, you said that Rob Marshall's directing and the adaptation specifically. And Clarisse, you've said the script for Casablanca. I hate this bit because you're all right, like for very, very different reasons. Dan, you got a bonus point, so I don't feel too bad about this. I'm gonna give Casablanca top marks, 3 points. The Departed 2, and Chicago gets 1, but you got a bonus point for rhyming unintentionally, so you've got 2 points as well. So right now, Casablanca is leading with 11 points, The Departed with 10, and Chicago with 6 points.
The same number of Oscar wins it got.
Yeah. Well,
Just to
that's it,
remind you all.
actually. I mean, we haven't spoken about that yet, is that Chicago, out of the 3 that we're talking about, got the most Oscars.
Because it's a musical.
Yeah, but like you can't. The Oscars are so
Yeah,
wrong all
yeah,
of the time.
They picked Green
And
Book.
I'm not saying that Chicago didn't deserve it. I was very happy the year that Chicago won. But if you look back at like some of the stuff that wasn't awarded is shocking.
It is. It really is. The fact that actually, this is a personal one for me, even though I wasn't around, is that in 1969, Oliver won Best Picture, and 2001: A Space Odyssey wasn't nominated.
Let's get into some further trivia.
Go on.
The first musical to win Best Picture since Oliver was Chicago.
Wow.
And no other musical has achieved it since.
Thank you for the tee up, Dan.
Go ahead.
It's cultural impact, and this is the final round, and we're going to be talking here specifically about how your film impacted film overall. Like, what is it about your movie that influenced further pieces of work or anything like that? Dan, it seemed like you had something to say, so we'll start with you.
I do, yes, that's right. So Chicago was the first movie to win Best Picture that was a musical in 30 years. The movie musical was the bastion of the golden age of Hollywood, and then it came to Hello, Dolly, and it all went wrong. And Oliver won Best Picture. There was a spate of cult classics. You had Cabaret as sort of the last great, musical. And then there was Grease, which was a big hit. There was Rocky Horror, which was an underground culty hit. But, Disney, I suppose, Disney animated movies. But when it comes to like an out-and-out musical hit, ain't nothing till Chicago. And then from that moment onwards, you had the producers of several huge studios be like, well, what properties can we have? And then we had, I've written a list down, we had the producers, we had Rent, we had Sweeney Todd, we had Phantom of the Opera, Once, Mamma Mia, La La Land, Les Miserables, Cats. And all of that, they have been desperately trying to recreate the success of Chicago since. And Into the Woods as well, Rob Marshall's was another, I think, good example of.
And more recently, Mary Poppins Returns.
Indeed. Well, yeah, but none of them have quite managed to match Chicago, but it's not stopped them trying.
So it has a failing cultural impact.
Incorrect.
Nice
My
one.
point is,
Nice.
I mean, that's what I heard.
that is what it has not stopped them from trying because of how good it was. And also they've got a big height to hit.
There's no participation points
I
here.
will fight you.
I mean, actually,
Jazz hands aplenty.
Joe, good point, but also, is it even worth having a conversation about cultural impact when Casablanca is in the mix?
and to be honest, I'm not going to lie. I was going to come here and just hold my hands up and be like, listen, I feel like The Departed is like it's probably his weakest point, maybe his cultural impact, because of everything that all of the actors had done up to that point, and like it's Scorsese, and like he's already affected cinema so much that it's hard to see him like re-affect it with this. But I would say like this was one of his best movies at the time, and everyone in it carried on to have a successful career. So it's tough. But
I mean, and this is probably going to be controversial because the Departed is an adaptation.
I was about to say,
Infernal Affairs.
Of Infernal Affairs, and I think it's better.
It is.
I think it's way better, actually. I think that Infernal Affairs isn't anywhere near as good as The Departed, in my opinion, which might be offensive to some people watching this, and I'm bracing for impact. But yeah, I agree. Clarisse, I mean, just take your points.
Well, it's kind of hard because Casablanca is so influential that I can't just list every movie ever named. Okay, I'm gonna.
You get a little bonus point if you manage to bring up Tenet in this, because there is a reference to Casablanca in Tenet.
Is it the plane?
No,
Because they get off the plane.
Don't they say Casablanca? There's something about.
Yeah, he
Don't
just
they
turns
go-
around and goes Casablanca.
Well, Casablanca's a
Wreck me
place,
down low.
though. It's a location.
No, Robert Pattinson says something in it. Do you want me to just tell you?
He's looking at you.
No, he when he leaves the protagonist, he says, "To me, this is the end of a beautiful friendship."
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, Dan. No,
I
Dan.
mean,
But does he sing it?
to pinpoint two movies that in themselves were very, very influential, both Indiana Jones and Star Wars were heavily influenced by Casablanca, because both the Mos Eisley Cantina and also the Obi-Wan Club are basically Rick's Cafe. I mean, the
Better music in
filmmakers
Star
have-
Wars, though. Play it again, Sam.
I mean, you could argue that point. That's a point that could be argued. And so you've got that. You've got Jabba the Hutt. It's based off one of the sort of like minor villains of Casablanca, the owner of the Blue Parrot Cafe, because he's got wearing a fez. And in the first sketches of Jabba the Hutt was also wearing a little fez, which I think was great. Obviously, the entire character of Han Solo is just based off
Humphrey
like-
Bogart.
And I feel like that character's been the basis for every sort of swaggering, cool anti-hero who doesn't want to really be a part of it until he steps up to the plate at the last moment. I mean, every single version of that character is really just...
That is literally what Han
great.
Solo's character arc is in the first Star Wars.
It literally, yeah, it is.
But also responsible for the prevalence of fedoras. And
That's a good point, Dan.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I feel
Not with
like that
fedoras,
was
no.
just the fashion at the time, right? Like, Casablanca did not invent the fedora. The fedora was going to happen whether or not Casablanca was made.
It helped.
I think this is quite an easy short round, unless you want to say anything else, Clarisse.
I have another.
Please go ahead, Dan.
Because I'm going to expand it wider.
Okay.
Because not just when we talk cultural impact, it contributed to more people going to the musicals. It contributed to more people going to the West End. It contributed to audiences finally feeling like, oh, maybe that's not an elitist world that I can't. And along with Mamma Mia and The Lion King, it opened the doors to evil musical theatre kids like me to walk into these and then co-opt the airwaves with Glee.
Okay, I feel like this is turning into a negative point if you're saying it created musical theatre kids.
I think you're right though, Dan, because I didn't even think about the fact that actually before Chicago came out, the closest that we had to musicals in cinema was all the Disney movies.
What about Moulin Rouge? I feel like
Moulin
that's
Rouge
been
was
left out.
contemporarily, yeah. I agree.
Yeah, I'm not.
So
a fan.
it kind of shared the glory.
But
with
did Moulin Rouge win Best Picture? No. Chicago
Oh,
did.
no, but
and if
it
we're looking for the
sh-
best Picture, no other musical has achieved it since.
That is true, except for La La Land for like 2 minutes.
Didn't count.
Okay,
I'm deciding
so
it counted.
I think
Just
it's
for
quite
this,
obvious.
I don't
this
actually
one.
believe that, but just for this, I'm deciding it's counting.
I'm going to give Casablanca full points, obviously, and then Dan, Chicago's getting 2 points.
Stop it.
and The Departed is getting 1 point because I think you're right. I think you're right, Joe. Like Martin Scorsese, the reason he got to make The Departed the way he did and with who he did is because he was already Martin Scorsese and he'd already changed cinema enough times. He was like, I'm just gonna go for it on this one. And I don't believe as well, I think we already mentioned it, I don't believe that he got given the Oscar for this because they didn't give him the Oscar for Goodfellas. I think this
goes back to Scorsese's least best movie is still better than most people's movies, you know?
And it's always that's just the case with the Oscars is that like they never give it to the right movie because you don't know what like an iconic movie is the year that it comes out. Of course you don't know. You only know that 10 years down the line.
Judi Dench getting it for Shakespeare in Love.
Oh.
Also, by the way, just for clarity, The Departed is not Martin Scorsese's least best movie.
No,
it's
isn't.
one of his best movies.
Yes,
I just want to be clear in what I'm saying with that.
Yeah. Okay, so
I'm
the
glad,
final...
'cause I was judging you.
The final points are in... and Chicago has 8 points.
It is an honor just to be nominated.
The Departed has 11 points. And Casablanca wins quite easily with 14 points.
You love me. You really love me. I feel vindicated and I feel good because, like, Casablanca deserves to be loved.
It does, and I agree with you as well. It's not just an old film that people should watch because it's considered a classic. It genuinely holds up. I try and watch it. To me, it's like a Christmassy movie. I like to watch it. It's very heartwarming around Christmas for me.
With a box of wine.
With a box of wine. It does go down really well with a box of wine.
There you go.
Because you just
Joe's
want
not
to
a
have a
fan.
good little cry and a good little
No
swoon.
one will be changing my mind on Casablanca.
I tried.
Okay, so Clarisse, for the second time, please take the Screen Test Award. Very nice. Oh, that was quite good, actually.
Ah, so seamless.
There's
Just like the
definitely not two of
seamlessness of
them.
Casablanca in developing
Anyone
its
you'd like to
themes.
thank?
Humphrey Bogart.
Oh.
And
No, just me. I think
myself.
I did this.
I'm gonna thank myself because I tried really hard on this one because I love Casablanca. So
Congratulations. Where are you going to keep your award?
next to my other award in my specially built awards room.
It's tiny.
Yeah, it's just a pillow fort.
They go on top of the washing machine.
And now it's time for my favourite part of the show, called Unbox The Plot. Dan, please sing us a theme song for Unbox The Plot.
It's Unbox The Plot. That's it.
Cool. Okay, so
Do I get a point for that?
The rules
we've
are
done the
pretty
points, haven't
simple.
we?
In here, I have picked one of my favourite Best Picture winners, and there are 4 clues, and you get 4 chances to guess. But if you guess sooner, I'll give you more points, even though it doesn't matter now. But the sooner you guess it, that somebody could win based on the sooner they guess.
Okay.
Okay. Here we go.
I am so bad at this.
The clues are going to get progressively easier.
It's just not worse than me. I'm terrible.
Okay. This is the first clue. Got some armbands. Anybody got any ideas?
I've got one.
Have you written? Are you committing to on the first
Is
clue?
this my
Dan?
only
This is
chance
your only.
to guess?
This is your only guess. Yes.
Then no.
Okay. Armbands. Okay. The next one is three little Oscar men. Froscars.
So won 3
One for each of us.
Oscars.
It won 3 Oscars, correct. And
not
I can
this
tell
one,
you
then.
specifically what they were, if you want me to. Do you
Yeah,
want me to do
go
that?
for it.
Yeah.
Okay, so it won for Best Picture, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Supporting Actor.
I have instantly forgotten every movie that's won Best Picture, so I'm doing really, really good right now.
Casablanca
Okay.
won Best Picture.
It did.
This is your third clue. Ready? It's got a little remote. Hang on.
What is that?
Ah.
An eyeball.
Oh, oh, oh.
Did that happen in the film?
No, it didn't. Ah. Oh no.
Is it? What is it? Is it a moon
Is it
or a
crystal
ball?
Maybe, Clarisse.
Oh, okay, okay. No, but it can't be that.
What did it win for?
Best Picture, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Supporting Actor.
Next clue, please.
This is your final clue. Just going to open my envelope.
It's my favourite part.
This is the final clue. This is a hilarious clue, by the way. It says La La Land.
I got a guess.
Okay.
What? Okay.
Dan,
Is it Moonlight?
it is Moonlight.
Yeah. But the moon, that's the clue.
Moonlight. It's a moonlight.
Moonlight, but then
Yeah,
I was like,
but-
that's
Moonlight, not the
Joe's
moon.
not a fan of these clues.
My first guess was Titanic, and I don't know
Why?
if that
'Cause of
makes
the
me
armbands?
problematic. Yeah.
Oh my god, that's dark.
But then it was like, oh, it's only 3 Oscars.
no. I think those clues were good. I should have guessed Moonlight. I should have.
Did you not make a guess at all, Clarisse?
I got Moonlight when you said La La Land, but I was still angry about the moon. Cause
I love this. Moonlight.
Moonlight. Because I was thinking like Gravity or something.
I thought Gravity,
Because doesn't she have floaty things?
because the
at
moon is in
end?
space.
The moon is
Yeah,
in
and
space.
it
Thank
is
you, Dan. Bonus
actually
point.
the moon. Right. Never
So
mind.
Dan,
Yeah.
you won Unbox the Plot.
Oh,
You didn't,
fabulous.
you didn't win the battle, but you won the war.
Well, exactly, and I think I'll go down in the Hall of Fame. Really, I'll be one of those ones that was like, I can't believe it didn't even win. You know, that's me in this context.
Well, that's all the time we have this week. Congratulations to Clarisse and to Casablanca for being the official best picture winner of all time. They can probably bin their Oscar now and just replace it with the Screen Test trophy. It's more valuable, I think. It's rarer, if anything. Don't forget that there's loads of great Oscar-winning movies on Prime Video, including Gone Girl, Manchester by the Sea, and The Life of Pi. So give some of them a watch and let us know your favourites in the comments below. Thank you so much to Daniel J. Layton for joining us this week. But me, Joe, and Clarisse will be back next week to chat about what the best war movie of all time is with Paul Tweddle, a.k.a. Heavy Spoilers. So hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss it, and we'll see you then. Bye!